February 4th, 2007, Super Bowl Sunday. In Abilene, Texas, most homes are filled with the roar of the crowd and the glow of the television. But inside one modest house on a quiet street, history is about to write a different kind of play. Not a victory, an extinction. At 11:42 p.m., a 911 operator answers a call. The voice on the other end belongs to a child. But he does not sound like a victim. He sounds hollow. The victim is his 4-year-old sister, Ella. The perpetrator is 13-year-old Paris Bennett. To understand how a child becomes a killer, we have to look at the fractures in the foundation. But as investigators would soon learn, there was no drug-fueled rage here. No psychotic break. Just a quiet, chilling strategy. This is the case of Ella Bennett. To the outside world, Charity Lee was a survivor. She had clawed her way out of a dark childhood and addiction to build a life for her 2 children. Ella was the baby of the family, born in 2002. She had blonde hair, green eyes, and a personality that Charity later described as dynamic. She walked into a room expecting a party. She was love in a tiny, bossy package. And then there was Paris. 13 years old, whip smart, an IQ of 141, qualifying him for Mensa. He was a voracious reader, quiet, introverted, but most importantly, he was the doting big brother.
In home videos, the image is idyllic. Paris holding Ella as a newborn, swearing she was beautiful. Paris picking out her clothes. Paris holding her hand. Charity thought she had won the lottery with her eldest son. He was a genius who loved his sister. But there were cracks in the drywall. The family history reads like a Greek tragedy. Charity's own mother, Kyla, had been charged with conspiring to murder Charity's father, a case that ended in a shocking acquittal. Violence lingered in the bloodline like a recessive gene waiting to activate. And for Charity, the stress of breaking the cycle was immense. Shortly before the murder, struggling with the weight of single parenthood and past trauma, Charity relapsed into drug use. Paris noticed. He later told investigators that his mother's relapse was the catalyst. But he didn't plan to confront her. He didn't plan to run away. He planned revenge. Sound of a knife being sharpened slowly. Most true crime stories involve a trigger, a fight, a robbery gone wrong, a moment of heat. The murder of Ella Bennett is the antithesis of that. It was premeditated, not in the heat of passion, but in the cold logic of a mind that processes emotion differently.
Paris later confessed to a horrifying strategy. He told detectives, and later Piers Morgan, that he harbored a hot, flaming ball of wrath in his stomach, directed at his mother. But murdering Charity outright would have been too quick. It would have ended her pain. He wanted her to live in perpetual agony. So he decided to take away the thing she loved most, her children. Note the phrasing, both children. He knew that if he went to jail for murder, Charity wouldn't just lose Ella, she would lose him too. He would become the monster who destroyed the family. He would become a living ghost she would visit in a prison cell for the rest of her life. On the night of February 4th, Charity was working the late shift at Buffalo Wild Wings. The Super Bowl meant crowds, which meant tips, which meant survival. She hired a young babysitter to watch the kids. Paris, using his charm and high IQ, manipulated the babysitter. He told her it was fine, that he was old enough to handle things, that she could go home. The babysitter left. Paris was alone with Ella.
Here is where the timeline becomes a roadmap of psychopathy. First, Paris went online. He consumed hours of violent, hardcore pornography.
Experts who later reviewed the case noted this wasn't just curiosity, it was desensitization. He was preparing his neural pathways for the violence to come. Then he entered Ella's room. What happened next is difficult to recount. He sexually assaulted his sleeping sister. He then proceeded to stab her. Not just once, not in a blind rage. 17 times. In his confession, Paris described the feeling of the knife entering her body. He said it felt like stabbing a mattress or a marshmallow. He told the police he pulled the knife out slowly. This was not a tantrum. This was methodology. After Ella stopped moving, Paris did not panic. He did not cry. He did not try to save her. He went to his room, picked up the phone, and called a friend from school. He chatted for 6 minutes. Just a normal teenager talking to a buddy, while his 4-year-old sister bled out in the next room. Only then, after he had finished his conversation, did he dial 911. The 911 call is a masterclass in deceptive manipulation. Paris refused CPR. He told the operator there was no point. He pretended he was having a psychotic break, claiming he thought Ella was a inflamed pumpkin-headed demon. He was building an insanity defense in real time. When the operator finally forced him to perform CPR, Paris simply held the phone away from his body and counted numbers out loud to simulate compression noises. He was an actor on a stage, and the only audience member who mattered was the judicial system. When police arrived, they noted a chilling detail. Paris had no tears. He would scrunch up his face, trying to force the emotional response, but his eyes remained dry. One officer noted that his attempts to cry appeared insincere. Meanwhile, across town, Charity was working a double shift. She saw the police walk into the restaurant. She remembers the look on their faces.
They told me my daughter had been hurt. I said, "You need to take me to Ella now." And they said, "You can't. She's dead."
In the ultimate twist of the knife, Charity immediately asked about Paris.
"Where is my son? Is he safe?"
She was relieved when they said he was at the station.
It wasn't until she got to the station that the geometry of her grief rearranged itself. She was not the mother of a victim. She was the mother of a victim and a perpetrator. She had lost 2 children the moment Paris picked up that knife. In the interrogation room, Paris initially stuck to the demon story, but faced with the evidence, the mask slipped. He confessed. And then he looked at his mother. Charity recalls a moment in the district attorney's office, weeks later, when she sat across from her son. He looked at her, the woman who had rocked him to sleep, who had marveled at his genius. And he struck again. He reminded her of a conversation they had once had. Charity had said she would never be able to kill anyone unless someone hurt her children. Paris looked at her and smiled. I bet you didn't think it was going to turn out like this. Clinical psychologists evaluated Paris Bennett extensively. The consensus was terrifying. Paris is a psychopath. This is not the Hollywood version of a screaming lunatic. This is a person who lacks affective empathy. He can cognitively understand that you are sad, but he does not feel your sadness. He does not feel guilt. He feels boredom, and he feels rage.
Because he was 13, Texas law prevented him from being tried as an adult. The minimum age is 14. He was tried in juvenile court. To the shock of many, and the relief of Charity, who refused to see him executed, Paris pleaded guilty to capital murder. He received the maximum sentence for a juvenile, 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20. He is currently housed in an adult facility. His projected release date? February 2027. But perhaps the most chilling statistic is the parole board's dilemma. How do you release a man who has stated explicitly that he has no remorse? A man who told his mother he enjoys watching her suffer. In a 2019 interview with Piers Morgan, Paris was asked if he could be rehabilitated. He remained stoic. Morgan later said it was one of the most disturbing interviews of his career, and he was not even allowed to sit in the same room as Paris. So where does this leave Charity Lee? Most people expect the mother of a murdered child to want vengeance. They expect a lifetime of hatred. But Charity is a complex woman who understands the cyclical nature of trauma. In the years following the murder, Charity did something that defies logic. She forgave him. She wrote a memoir titled How Now, Butterfly. She founded the Ella Foundation, Empathy, Love, Lessons, Action, to help families affected by violent crime.
And for a long time, she continued to visit Paris in prison. She would drive hours, sit behind the glass, and talk to the boy who destroyed her life. Critics called her naive. Supporters called her a saint. Charity called it survival. She told Good Morning Britain that she couldn't afford to walk around angry. It would have killed her. However, even unconditional love has a breaking point. In 2021, Charity made the painful decision to cut off all communication with Paris. The catalyst? He had become involved with a woman who was out on bond for allegedly planning a mass shooting. The proximity to that level of violence, orchestrated by her son from behind bars, was the final straw. She told a documentary crew, "I finally accepted it is okay to love him as my son, but really dislike the man he has become." Charity has a third child now, a son named Phoenix. It is a name laden with symbolism, rising from the ashes of Ella's death and Paris's imprisonment. But Charity knows the risk. Experts have told her that Paris is dangerous. They have told her that if he is released, she and Phoenix are likely targets. Paris himself has admitted that the dark side is dormant, not dead. She is essentially waiting to see if the monster she raised will be unleashed into the world again.
The case of Ella Bennett is not a whodunit. We know who did it. He confessed. It is a why-done-it, and the answer is more terrifying than a ghost story. Paris Bennett was not a product of poverty. He was not a victim of physical abuse. He was a highly intelligent child born into a family with a history of trauma who decided with absolute clarity that the emotional destruction of his mother was worth the price of his own humanity and the life of his sister. The system failed Ella in many ways. Warning signs were missed. A psychiatric hold a year prior to the murder resulted in a discharge without a long-term plan. But perhaps the case serves as a stark warning about the nature of evil. Evil, in the 21st century, is not a shadowy figure in an alley. Sometimes it does its homework. Sometimes it has an IQ of 141. And sometimes it kisses its sister goodnight. As for Ella, she remains frozen in time. April 12, 2002 to February 4th, 2007. 4 years, 9 months, and 23 days.
A life that barely began, ended by the brother who was supposed to be her protector. In her short life, she taught her mother how to love unconditionally. In her death, she forced the world to look into the eyes of a child psychopath and ask the unanswerable question: are some people just born broken?